that was the war song, the lead single from the album Waking Up with the House on Fire. Now, when I first heard this as a kid, that chorus, war is stupid and people are stupid. I didn't really know what it was about, but it was catchy, and I was going, war, war, war. So for me, I didn't really get it at the time. I didn't know it was political because I was a kid, I didn't know these things, but it did get to number two in the UK, just into the top 20 in the US. Was it too political at the time, Adrian, do you think?
See, I don't really think Culture Club were being political in the sense that I think they were sort of dealing with the politics of people rather than politics for the sake of politics. I think they were talking about people's relationship to war and what that might mean to people as opposed to here's a war anthem. Going back to 84, you had a few anthemic sort of songs in there. You sort of had Frankie Goes to Hollywood's, Two Tribes, where they talked about war. And, George would later admit that that was what inspired the war song, because the war song wasn't recorded in the first burst of recording. It was recorded
Yeah.
sort of after they toured Japan and Australia in sort of July 84. And being the thing that they wanted to put out straight away, that ended up being the first single. But prior to that, Culture Club had written a song called Clone War, which didn't make the album. And that was one where they were talking about, well, we're all on the same page. That song had a line that said, how can you start a revolution when the revolution's holding hands? And it was the sort of thing of where, what are we fighting against when we're all fighting for the same sort of things? To the point where a lot of their merchandise on the tour before Waking Up with the House on Fire had, Clone War as a slogan on there, much like Wham did with Choose Life and that sort of thing. But I mean, if you talk about other songs for that year that sort of had that sort of anthemic sort of feel, you've got Duran Duran's Wild Boys, which had that sort of chart something. The Eurythmics Sex Crime 1984. You had all that sort of stuff where it had a political undertone without necessarily always being political.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I don't think the world at that time necessarily needed Culture Club to be political.
Hmm.
So it was one of those things that were quite divisive because Culture Club were doing it in a way that was very sort of almost basic, where war is stupid and people are stupid. People took offense to that rather than just went, yeah, you know what? Yeah, war is stupid.
Especially in the US, number 17 in the US, did much better outside the US, number two in the UK, in Australia, number one in Ireland, top 10 in several European countries, and including New Zealand as well. On the 7 inch, on the B side was a Spanish version of the war song, and he recorded quite a few variations in German, French, and Japanese. Whose idea was it to do these variations?
I think it was just something they came up with in the studio at the time, and it was sort of like almost, I guess, a gimmick to do it to specific territories, I guess, to make everyone around the world feel inclusive with the message that they were trying to get across.
Back in the day, in the 80s, your pocket money only went so far. So you had to sort of almost, okay, I've got the album. I don't need the single, but there's a B side on the single that's not on the album. So I might get the 7 inch, but I couldn't afford to get the 12 inch. So you just sort of like barter which one to sort of get. I didn't have many Culture Club singles, but I had all the albums on vinyl. There was a picture disc, a 7 inch picture disc, which I believe you have,
I
and
do.
it's quite collectible and expensive. I think I'm not sure if I sent you a picture or not, or maybe it was our friend Josh, who's not with us anymore, but
Mhm.
I sent him a photo when I was in Auckland in Royal Gravy Records. There was quite a few of these 7 inch picture discs on the shelf. And I said to Josh, I think it was maybe you or Josh, I'm not sure, but do you guys have these 7 inch picture discs? And you have the War Song picture disc, don't
I
you?
do have the War Song picture disc. So my copy I bought back in the day from eBay, and it would have been about 20 odd years ago,
Yeah.
where I spent just over £300 for it. It's worth more than
20
that
years
now,
ago.
though. This is 20 years ago, not now. Yeah.
How much is that worth now, do you think?
I haven't looked. I haven't looked. But
Oh, goodness.
yeah, so I mean, with the war song, so with the picture disc, I mean, there's a lot of sort of speculation, and I guess it's almost like an urban myth as to why it was discontinued. But it pretty much got put out in the first week and then got withdrawn and replaced by a red vinyl version. And a lot of sort of, I guess, the theories behind that is where the hole is placed on the cover. So, I've got it here, but I mean, we're listening to this on a podcast, but I'll show you across our Zoom, Leo. But where
Oh,
where the hole in the middle is shown is
yeah.
right in the middle of George's head,
Right, it is. So,
which, some could be like, oh, is he taking a bullet hole to the head or something?
yeah, so we can put this on YouTube, by the way, guys, so
Yeah,
you
cool.
can see what we're talking about. But it's a beautiful picture. Also on the flip side, oh wow, it's a
Yeah.
picture disc on both sides, and it's got George on the front and the guys in the back. Beautiful picture disc, and back in those days, it was quite rare, and now it's even rarer. And there's the red
There's
one
the
as
red one.
well. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
So yeah, so the picture disc for that one is particularly rare. I mean, Culture Club did picture discs for most of their singles in the 80s, but I guess the War Song, because it was withdrawn really quickly, increased its collectability and value. So it's still a pretty hard one to get. And when you see it pop up on things like Discogs or eBay now, they could be anywhere between five to $600 in Aussie dollars, that is, to
Wow.
anywhere over 1,000 and beyond. It just depends on who's selling it and who knows, I guess, what the value of it is.
There was a couple of Aussie connections with the war song. The video clip was directed by an Aussie, Russell
Russell
McKay.
Mulcahy.
McKay,
Yeah.
yeah. He's directed videos for Elton John and Berlin, Taylor Dane, Icehouse, so many great videos. And at the time, it was quite expensive, the video for the war song.
Apparently, the war song at the time it was recorded was the most expensive clip, or somewhere in the higher regions of the most expensive clip ever made. I mean, there were a lot of special effects, which now you just look at and go, oh, that's just a video clip. You could do that in, Final Cut Pro or whatever
Mm,
video program. But back in the day, it would have taken a lot of effects and a lot of expensive things to do some of the the visuals that you see in the clip.
exactly.
And it was one of those things. It was shot on in the Docklands in London. George had about 7 or 8 different hairstyles and colors and looks and everything. You had 400 kids dressed as skeletons, a tank, you name it. It was pyrotechnic madness.
Yeah.
Very, very of its time. I mean, we talked about, I mentioned Duran Duran before, but I think Russell
Wild
Mulcahy
Boys.
directed Wild Boys as well. And
Mhm.
that was another giant sort of
Amazing video.
soundstage production and lots of extras and lots of things happening.
And the other Aussie connection was the single cover was shot by Stevie Hughes in Sydney. He's a makeup artist and photographer here in Sydney. We're in Sydney. And he shot the single cover and the cover for the album. But yeah, really great photography in this era.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so with the War Song cover that was shot in Sydney when Culture Club were here on their colouring down under tour in '84. So if you notice if you're watching the video from the Channel 9 where they televised the whole concert, George is wearing the same hat and pretty much the same hair and outfit that he's wearing on the War Song cover sleeve. The record company loved what Stevie did with those shots for the War Song cover of George, that Stevie was flown to London to shoot the rest of the album cover. So the pictures of Roy, John, and Mikey from the single cover of the War Song to some of the ones they used for the album and a lot of the promotion at the time were all shot by Stevie.
Yay.
And Stevie continued. I mean, this is something that's sort of aside, but a lot of Culture Club and George fans might know this. But Stevie and George were great friends right up until the '90s when Stevie passed away from AIDS.
Oh,
sadly,
yeah.
and was one of the people that George wrote the song Illador from in the 90s.
Oh,
It was dedicated to Stevie and it was about him,